also trying to show people that if you want something in a certain way, you work long enough at it and you can achieve it. I think there is not only one way to be a classical musician. There is not only either being a soloist or playing in an orchestra. You can do whatever you really want if you really put your mind into it. And
Good morning, Michael.
Yes, hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. It's so lovely to meet you here on Zoom.
Nice to meet you too.
So, Michael, I'm so interested in your story. You're a cellist.
Yes, that's true.
So tell me, where are you based at the moment?
I live in Hamburg in Germany. That's where I'm based at. And I've been living here since 2011. So quite a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where were you? Were you born there?
No, I was born in Greece, actually. I am half Greek, half German. So, yeah.
Wow. And I mean, how wonderful to have been then a child in Greece because of the lovely weather and the beautiful country.
Yes, it was a pleasure growing up there. Yeah, I grew up in Greece up until I was 17, and then I came to Germany to study. So,
So there, I've actually spoken to a few Greek musicians as well, and during the pandemic also, and I have a little bit of an idea, but you can tell me more. So as a child growing up there in Greece, how much did you have opportunities and inspiration to become a musician?
Well, I come from a pretty artistic family. Not many musicians in my direct environment, but a lot of artists. My mother is a dancer. She was a ballet dancer also in Germany for a long time. And my father is a painter. So my big rebellion was to be a musician. But yes, but Greece, I think, lends itself for giving inspiration, giving these, you have the big fiestas there where you dance and you sing and you do all these things. Sadly, for classical music, there is not much of a tradition there. That's why usually people, when they want to study classical music, they have to go abroad. But at least you get this initial spark from Greece.
Mm-hmm. So, and the cello, what was it about the cello that made you intrigued to play the cello?
Yeah, well, it's actually a nice little story because when I was little, we were listening to a lot of music, of course, at home, but my mother got me this book that it was called The Instruments of the Orchestra. And it had also an audio cassette with it. So every page was a different instrument, like a sketch where a little animal was playing this instrument, and then you could hear the instrument on the cassette. And when I got to the cello, it was a tiger playing the cello with a nice blue background. And on the recording, it was the beginning of the Sixth Suite by Bach. So I heard this sound and I said to my mother, I want to play this instrument.
Wow.
Well, in the beginning, she thought, yeah, well, it's quite an expensive hobby. The cello, also difficult in Greece to find good teachers and all these things. So we'll wait. But I went outside to the garden and I got a piece of wood that I sort of carved into this shape of a cello. And I got these rubber bands from the kitchen, which I used as strings. So when she saw that I was trying to build my own cello, she brought me to my first cello teacher.
Amazing. Oh, this is amazing. I mean, this is determination.
Yeah. I knew I wanted it since then, and I've never stopped.
And then was it, you say it was difficult to get a cello teacher? Was it then, was there enough for you to get your education as a young boy?
Well, it was difficult to get a good cello teacher. I had to change a lot of things in my playing throughout my life, even after I started my studying. The technique, the things that you learn in the beginning are so very important. And, it's difficult to relearn after that. But I had to go through all these things. I think I changed my technique for, I think, maybe 5 times. So
Really?
it is also possible.
Oh, okay. But now, this is also interesting to think if you didn't have so much, were there orchestras and things with youth orchestras where you could, play, or what was the thing that kept you motivating if there weren't not many other musicians around you?
Well, I never played in a youth orchestra when I was little. And there was a music school, like a school where you would also do music, but I didn't go to that school because there I would have had to learn a lot of instruments, also a lot of traditional Greek instruments, which took a big part of the afternoon, and I wouldn't have enough time to practice my cello. So in order to become a cellist, I had to avoid going to the music school.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know. I think it was just I was in love with the sound of the instrument, and I couldn't get enough of it. So I was just practicing and practicing. And at some point, when I went to the conservatory, I was 10 years old, and I had to do an exam to get in. And I was really afraid for the exam. And that's the only moment in my life, I think, that I questioned the cello just because of this fear. But my mother told me, you just do the exam, and if you don't want to play anymore, then you can stop. And I played the exam, and they put me in the highest class for my age. So I was
Wow.
very, very happy with that. And
Yeah. And so what brought you then to Germany? Was it then the decision to do it as a career?
Yes, well, I think that this decision I made this decision very early in my life. When I was already a child, I think I knew I wanted to do this forever as a job. And when I was 14, I started going to Germany every summer and doing different master classes with different teachers, and trying to see to open my horizons and to see how cello is being played outside of Greece, which was a very eye-opening experience. I've never heard something like that. I've heard CDs and recordings, but I never knew that people could play like that live. So yeah, I started going to these master classes every summer. And at some point, when I was 16, I found the teacher that I wanted to study with. And when I was 17, I went and applied in the music school in Hanover, where I started and did my first part of my studies.
And that's still young to make a transition from one country to another. Was that difficult?
Yes, it was not only that I was very young, but also I had no experience. I've never washed my own clothes. I came to Germany, and I had a small apartment, and so I was starting to experiment with cooking and see how I can make my own food and how the washing machine works and all these things work that I didn't know. I mean, I knew that they existed, but my mother always did all these things for me. So but I was living alone when I was 17, and it was also a good experience, I think, also musically, because I had this focus and dedication to music. I was suddenly not, I didn't have any friends in the beginning. The first year probably of my studies, I didn't know many people. I was a little bit afraid because my German was also not the best. and everyone was much older than me, because usually, at least back then in Germany, you would start studying when you were 19, and I was still 17. So for the next couple of years, I was the youngest in my class. Yeah, so I didn't have many friends, and I was just focused on the cello and getting to learn how I can be independent, sort of.
Well, okay. I can say one thing is it was harder for your mum as it was for you.
Well,
I'm
I
sure.
guess so.
Yeah. I remember my son when he left home, the first time he said to me, I don't have to cook for him, was me. It was me. What? Really? Do you want to cook your own food?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
I think my mother, she always told me that she was very sad when she was either leaving Germany or when I was leaving Greece, but she wouldn't have it any other way.
Oh, okay. But so in that time, when you were like sort of adapting to the life in Germany, and also, like you say, the age difference, but how did it progress then for you? I mean, how did you then get part of this whole thing?
Well, when you start studying, you become a part of a class, and you get to meet the other cellists and the other people studying around you. I started meeting also the other Greek people that were studying in the same school as I was, although I put that off for quite a while because I wanted to just immerse myself in the culture of Germany. I didn't want to be a Greek person in Germany. I wanted to just get to know everything, as deeply as I could. And yes, and so because also I was so young, then a lot of concert requests started coming, and I started meeting new people. And yes, this was a nice time. I also had a very good connection with my teacher back then, and then I just started thinking of how I would progress in this environment and see what I would do after I was finishing my first degree. And I always had, as a child, these recordings by this other cellist, Arton Oras, a great Finnish cellist, and I started thinking of maybe going to Finland to continue my studies there with him. But I was very lucky because 1 year before I finished my studies in Hanover, he got a position here in Hamburg. So
Amazing.
yeah. So I came here and I played the audition and got a place, which was quite an achievement back then for me because I had a lot to change in these few years of my first studies. And then I came here to play, completely naively playing in this audition where 212 people took part, and he only took 2 students.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, I
Oh
was
my
very,
goodness.
very lucky that I got in
Yeah.
Hamburg.
But what do you think was it about you that made him choose you?
Wow, we have to ask him that. I saw him yesterday, actually. He's here in Hamburg. He comes once a year. I still have lessons with him once a year. So, sort of like a checkup, a musical checkup to see
Yeah.
that he's going well. I don't know.
Maybe I should ask him. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think he saw in me this drive and dedication that I have for the instrument. And I think because I had some lessons with him beforehand, that he saw that I was willing to put a lot of effort into progressing and learning whatever he was telling me. And yeah, I think that were the main qualities that got me this position. Yeah.
And it's interesting that you didn't play as a child in an orchestra, and later on, did you?
Well, of course, I played here in Germany many times, but it was never my goal to become an orchestral musician. And I also have never played an audition for an orchestra, which is
Okay.
quite weird for a cellist. But yeah, as a freelancer, I've played in many orchestras and many good and big orchestras all over the world. In Germany, in the Elbphilharmonie, and in Berlin, in New York, in Carnegie Hall. I've
But you play as a soloist.
I have played also in the orchestra as a
Okay.
part of the orchestra and as a soloist as well. Yes.
Mhm. But when you finished your studies, was it you were saying that you already during your studies started thinking, okay, so how am I going to get myself out there? Was it difficult to do in this industry where there seem to be many cellists?
Yes, it is a difficult industry, and it's difficult to find your way, especially if you want to do things your way, which is sort of what I am doing.
Yeah.
Because usually, if you want to get a solistic career, then you go to a big competition and try it out from there, which is also not a guarantee nowadays. Um, yes, but I tried. I wanted to do it my way. I was very interested in contemporary music when I finished actually my studies. I started studying myself by myself contemporary music and working with a lot of composers. And since Hamburg, it's a big city, but it doesn't have a very big contemporary music scene. Um, and since I was one of the cellists that played a lot of contemporary music, I started, playing everywhere. So, and I still keep on finding my own way in these things. Yes, for example, now I'm back to studying. I'm doing my doctorate in the school, which is also not a very usual thing to do for a performer in Germany, at least. In the States, it's more usual, but here it's. I think I'm one of the only ones in this doctorate program that is a musician, a performing musician, not a scientist, a music scientist, or a musicologist, or composer.
But what is it about this doctorate that why do you want to do it?
Well, this is also a nice story because when I started studying in Germany, I had the chance to go and visit my German grandmother. And at some point, she told me, "Oh, yes, we used to have a cellist in the family as well." And she gave me her name, Paul Grümmer. And I didn't think much of it at the time. I thought maybe in Germany, everyone has a cellist in their family. I don't know.
Yeah.
So years later, when I was doing my master's in Hamburg, I had some lessons, some Baroque cello lessons for a few semesters. And the professor came once in the classroom holding a picture, a black and white picture, and he said, "This is the guy who uh, reinvented the viola da gamba, Paul Grümmer." And I said, "Well, he's part of my family." And
Amazing.
I started learning more and more, and it turns out he was one of the biggest soloists in the early 20th century. Um, so I started collecting stuff about him, and I put on the internet. I wrote his name, and I said, "Well, I'm his great grandson, and if anyone knows more about him, I would like to know more." And 3 years later, after that, exactly on Christmas Day, I got an email from his great granddaughter telling
Wow.
me my father, so his grandson, he's now 82 years old, and he was also a cellist and a professor in Vienna, where you are. And Yes, professor in Vienna, and we are very happy that you are continuing the cellistic tradition of the family, which I didn't know existed. And yeah, so I went and met them, and the old man gave me cello lessons every day for 1.5 hours every morning, trying to teach me
Wow.
everything his grandfather taught him. And I also stumbled upon a lot of scores and books and things like that about him, and also works that were written for him by fairly well-known composers at the time. So I started collecting all these things, thinking that I would make an artistic project around that, like a concert or a CD or something like that. But then the pandemic hits, so I kept collecting documents, but I couldn't perform. And at some point, I had so many things that I thought maybe I can make a doctorate out of this.
Yes.
I suggested it to the Hochschule, the university here in Hamburg, and they said, yeah, very gladly. So I started doing this. But the main thing about this, the doctorate, it's that it's half scientific and half artistic. So I have to, of course, write my dissertation and so on, but I can also, um, use my ability as a musician to complement the dissertation. And in my case, I'm doing a recording of all the works that were written for my great grand uncle.
Isn't this so incredible how this came about? The timing of everything and how this came about. This is wonderful. This is really a nice story. I love this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then after the doctorate, what are you hoping to have these works? Because if they are these important works, that they get published and also played.
Yes, of course. Well, many of those works are published as of now, but they are not very often played. So I'm hoping that this can, well, the doctorate, the dissertation, which will be mainly focused on the biography of my great grand uncle. I hope that it will, remind people of his existence, because
Yeah.
he, of course, as a German musician, after the Second World War, many things were lost and scattered around the world, and I'm trying to bring all the pieces together and complete the puzzle, so that people know more about this continuation of the history of interpretation, especially in the cello. And I hope that these works can help find these things. So I hope at the end that I will have a nice book, a nice biography about him, and a nice CD with the works that were written for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually spoke to a conductor yesterday, William Walker, and he was saying that and this is now that you're saying that the work's not being very often played, that he specifically chooses for his concerts works that are not very often played. And I wonder now if this would be a new way for younger, because he's also a younger conductor, that you as younger musicians are now looking for these works, or finding joy in playing these works, new or works that's not often heard.
Yes, this is I mean, from every perspective, a very good way to go about things. On the one hand, you have all your very big historical recordings by big soloists playing these very specific works, and I mean, even from a purely marketing perspective, me recording the Bach suites when so many great cellists have played them. How many people are going to go and buy my CD versus a CD by a very respected old master? So having something new, to a new proposal, and not just completely contemporary music, but also works from the past that are not often played, um, it gives you an edge as a young professional trying to get yourself out there. And yes, I've had a lot of luck in this department, I must say, because I have had many composers write works for me that are really nice works that I have premiered and recorded. And then due to this work with a doctorate, I have the luck to find these pieces of music that no one plays anymore, but they are there, and it's really beautiful music.
Mm. That would be so interesting to read also the biography. I'll either you have to let me know. I'll watch on Instagram when you promote it.
It will take some time. It will take some.
Okay. But you were talking now about marketing, and I also ask artists in this sense that when you are focused more on the creative side of things, but there's of course always this marketing side. How do you market yourself and the business side of things? Are you good with that?
Well, apparently, yes. I didn't know about it, but apparently, I'm quite good with that. I I like being organized, which helps with these things. But also, I don't have a lot of fears about putting myself out there, like on social media, and putting my practice in full display for other people to see what I'm doing and how I'm practicing. Because for me, as a young musician starting out, so I didn't have, of course, that I've never saw how someone practices, someone who knows how to practices. And for me, I always thought that would be very interesting. So now that I'm in a position to know how to do it myself, I think it's interesting be to be able to present it also to, because Instagram is everywhere in the world, and everyone can see then and get new information and exchange information and all these things. And this growth on social media has helped quite a lot. I mean, I've gotten a lot of work and a lot of also things, let's say, from that helped with my career.
Well, I think it's wonderful that you do it that way, where you not only put the perfect final product, but that you put the practicing, while you're practicing. I actually spoke also to somebody yesterday, a pianist, who he calls himself the angry pianist, but he really shows the struggle also sometimes, with getting through the things, and he talks about what his struggles are. And like you say, young musicians coming up should also see that they are not when they're stuck, it's not that it's now all over, like everybody does that, even professional musicians.
Yes. Yes, this is I think this is very important, and it's kind of opened up in the last few years also with Hilary Hahn, for example, sharing her practicing on social media. And yes, I think the musical community has become a little bit more open and not as there is not as much of a trying to be better than each other and just shoving each other out the way. And I think if we work together, we can achieve many beautiful things, even in music, and progress much faster.
Do you think the pandemic also helped with that?
Definitely, the pandemic made a lot of us just focus a lot on social media and trying to stay relevant, let's say, through this difficult time. But I think it was also a good opportunity, at least for me, to go deeper in my practicing. to find new ways and have more time. I didn't have any deadlines with concerts and stuff like that. I didn't have any restrictions what the repertoire should be that I was practicing. So I could practice all the pieces that I had collected over the years that I've never had the chance to play, and make a lot of plans about concerts that I would like to make when this is all over. I think that's and that's also something that's interesting. I'm reading now in these olden times when my great grandfather and all these great people used to live. It was very usual to take 2 years off of playing just for practicing in order to make your playing spiritual. This seems to be a
Really?
very common thing a lot of biographies that I've read now for this thing. So in a
Mm.
way, this had to happen.
Yeah, but I was going to ask you this now. If you think that maybe in an artist's career that they, aside from the pandemic now, but somewhere in your career that you really have to take a year then at least off and just step back and evaluate where you are going.
I think artists should do this always, not always going back, but you always have to be aware where you are, where you want to go, and the opportunity for that will arise.
Mm.
Hopefully, not in the form of another pandemic, but
Yeah.
in even in the way that you think things progress according to the things that you want to achieve, I think.
Well, Michael, this is so lovely to talk to you. I love your story. It's so fascinating, and with your history, with the family and how your drive to become a cellist, and you didn't even know that it was in your family.
Mhm.
So there must be something out there.
There's something in the DNA, and probably, but I think I don't want to say that it wasn't also my choice.
Of course, yeah. No. You have to get the credit there, but I would have loved to see that instrument. I grew up in the 60s, and this would have been the sort of thing that we did in just creating things out of nothing. So
Yeah.
I think that's lovely. I hope your mother kept a picture or something with that.
I don't think so, but but we kept the memory at least.
Okay. Michael, but now what are your wishes for the future, apart from now your doctorate, but what would be the wish for the future?
Well, what I am starting now is teaching more and more, and also people that are a little bit further along with their studies and helping them in forms of master classes and stuff like that. So I think this is a very interesting thing for me, trying to enrich my own playing and practicing through the practices of the past that I am sort of looking at through the doctorate, and trying to give whatever is useful to the younger people, the next generation. So,
Yeah,
these are my wishes.
I've also heard this before from people musicians who teach, who say that they get so much back, from their pupils.
Yes, of course. I mean, I've learned a lot. Also, trying to teach young children how to hold the bow, I've learned a lot about myself.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, it's also somebody like you with your inspirational story that also has an effect then on a young student coming up, and how to motivate them, because it's also not, I think, just about the playing, but it's also about that motivation and that example that you set.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's also trying to show people that if you want something in a certain way, you work long enough at it and you can achieve it. I think there is not only one way to be a classical musician. There is not only either being a soloist or playing in an orchestra. You can do whatever you really want if you really put your mind into it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and it's good to hear that from a success story like yourself. So, Michael, you're in Hamburg now. So, can you do a shout out for your favorite coffee shop in Hamburg?
Oh, my favorite coffee shop. Oh my God.
Or a restaurant? Where's your local, or where do you hang out?
Where I hang out. Well, when I'm not practicing.
Yeah.
There is a very good Vietnamese place right next to the main station in Hamburg. It's called Quan. That's our favorite place with my girlfriend. We always go there when we have the time.
Oh, okay. So I'll put the link in the description as well from them. Michael, have a lovely afternoon, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with your publications and your recordings and things. So keep me updated, please, when that happens.
I will.
Okay. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Bye.